the evolutionary people tell us there was an evolutionary advantage about being pessimistic and worried about
Right.
things.
Like if you think, well, there's going to be food available later, you could see how that wouldn't work out well.
Yeah, or, is that brown spot out there a lion or a rock?
Right.
If you're like, it's a rock and you're wrong,
Right.
not so helpful.
Well, and like you said, lawyers, we have to plan. Opposing counsel is going to say this.
So you're practicing it and you're getting good at it.
Right. And so it's so easy
Yeah.
to do.
It is.
I will say, someone who does not have this problem is my husband. I'm like, is it going to rain today? He's like, no.
I wonder what it would be like to be someone like your husband.
Yes.
This is Admissible. I'm Natalie Blazer, Dean of Admissions at UVA Law. On today's show, we are discussing what I feel is a timely topic since we are in the lead up to the national election here in the U.S. And in fact, this episode will be released just a few days following the election. Whether we will actually know a result at that point, obviously yet to be determined. But I think generally speaking, this is a time when we can all benefit from being mindful of and taking care of our mental health. Here to discuss all of that and more with us today are my guests, Dr. Kate Gibson and Karen Painter, who from here on out I will call Kate and Karen, since we are colleagues and friends. Kate and Karen are psychotherapists with UVA's Counseling and Psychological Services, known around here as CAPS, and their work focuses exclusively on the mental health needs of our law school students. Kate is a licensed psychologist and attorney and practiced in big law for 8 years in Washington, D.C. before becoming a psychologist. She is at the law school full-time and has been with us at UVA since 2015. Karen, as a Chinese-American licensed professional counselor, has dedicated over a decade to providing mental health services at UVA. And prior to that, she had more than 20 years of clinical experience in the Central Virginia community. Karen splits her time between the law school and our neighbors at the business school, Darden. Welcome to the show, Kate and Karen.
Thanks for having us.
It's so great to see you two. So I always like to do an icebreaker / fun fact. We were talking before we started recording about what a glorious autumn it has been. Do you have a favorite fall activity to mark the season?
I like pumpkin things, so I know not everybody does, but I get excited about the pumpkin things.
Are you like a pumpkin spice latte person?
Pumpkin spice lattes, pumpkin bread,
Oh,
decorating
nice.
Pumpkins.
Love it.
Creative
I've been adding
ideas.
pumpkin puree to my oatmeal, and that has just given it a little like seasonal touch. How about you?
I just really like to walk around, scuff the leaves, and see the changes day to day. We have this beautiful garden behind the hotel next to the law school, and it's such a great place to go walk around and see nature.
It's really showing off for us this year, I have to say. Well, in the very first season of Admissible, which was, almost 2 years ago now, I had our Dean of Students, Dean Sarah Davies, on the show to discuss mental health and resilience and why, those things are important in law school and legal practice. So while this isn't technically the first time we've touched on this topic on the show, today I want to get a little bit more specific and talk about why it's important to get into the habit of managing mental health before you get to law school, in addition to detailing the direct services you two provide, along with all the other resources and support that we offer at UVA Law. Of course, hopefully this goes without saying, we're going to be speaking in generalities when it comes to mental health and how law school applicants and law students can stay well. We're not remotely getting into any confidentiality issues or anything like that. Just wanted to state that little legal disclaimer up front. Before we dive in, though, I would love to hear a little bit more about each of your backgrounds and what brought you into your roles as CAPS psychotherapists here at UVA Law. Kate, you went to law school and practiced law for 8 years before making this career transition. So can you tell us a little bit what led you to law school and legal practice in the first place, and then what, inspired you to pivot?
I think I'm like many of the students today. It seemed like a really fascinating and interesting area to study. And then a big firm, this financial stability, the training, the chance to work on important cases, all of that led me on that path. Over time, I think the focus on sort of the purely intellectual got a little bit much. I was seeing a therapist at the time and thinking through some of these issues, and then there were some family concerns that were going on that led me to reassess. Being a good lawyer, of course, I took it slowly and deliberately to see if I wanted to do the career switch, and it turns out it's been really great for me. It's wonderful to work at a place that values what I value, relationships, inclusivity, and social justice. And also I found that helping people on a one-on-one level just gives me immense joy. It was a surprising but wonderful thing to be able to weave those two things together starting in 2015.
And what was it like going back to get another degree? Or did you already have the degree? Or you went
Nope,
back?
I went back to school again.
Wow.
Turns out it's a lot harder to study and learn things when you're older.
I bet. Wow. But good for you. That's amazing. Karen, what about you? What led you to this career path initially and then to sort of the higher ed space?
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. I was, always interested in human thought and behavior. And at first I was a biology major, so I was thinking more research. I took a psychology class, and in part because of the professor, I think I was hooked. And also, I was a first-generation student, so I had to work. And so I did some volunteering first and then worked at a local domestic violence sexual assault safe home, and then decided I was just drawn to hearing more about people's stories and particularly about how they navigated these challenges. So I wanted to explore more, and so I worked in various settings with lots of age groups, and then was able to find an opportunity to jump from community work to UVA.
Yeah.
And I never looked back since. So at the law school, I feel like, is even more profound being part of professional graduate students' experience of thinking about their life decisions, integrating their life lessons maybe, culminating up to that point, and maybe thinking about the future. So I'm just excited to be part of it. And yeah, I feel like I'm making a difference. So
Yeah, absolutely. We're so lucky to have both of you. And it's interesting you said hearing about people's stories. I feel like that's what drew me to admissions in the first place. The young people, they're at such kind of like these transitions and what's next. And so I can definitely relate to that. So you've both been in this field. You've both been psychotherapists for a while now. I'm very curious if you have noticed any changes in your profession since you started. And like, are there more issues that you're seeing now than you used to? Like, what can you tell us, like in broad strokes, about changes to your profession since you started?
That's a great question. I think broadly, one of the things we see, which I think just about everyone sees, is the level of worry and anxiety has, continued to increase. And it overtook depression as the most significant diagnosis that we tend to see with folks 8 or 10 years ago. And then I think there's some other pieces as well. I think there's more awareness of and acceptance of gender identity and expression. I think there's increased interest in and vocalization of things through a social justice lens and more concern about the world and long-term issues. Clearly, there's also cultural changes, things like social media, technology. The last 4 years, we've all had to figure out how to do Zoom and remote work a lot of the time. And, of course, the other aspects of the pandemic. One of the wonderful things about this is, we see people who maybe 10 or 15 years ago had concerns like complex trauma or serious or chronic mental issues or physical issues that might not have even thought about going to law school. And now they're coming and succeeding thanks to all the supports, treatments, and acceptance.
Yeah. God, that is great. I didn't even think that maybe they would have counted themselves out, but that makes perfect sense. I'm curious, do you think people are just more comfortable sharing that they have anxiety and more comfortable saying they're going to therapy, more comfortable seeking out therapy? Or do you think really the anxiety did not exist before and it has really ramped up, or maybe a little of both?
yeah, I can answer that. I mean, absolutely. I I think people are much more open. I think it's part of the generation. It was also going through the pandemic hard to deny. Like, this is taking
Yeah.
a toll on folks. What I've noticed is also public figures and celebrities talking about it also helps people normalize and have the courage to take that first step and schedule an appointment. There's online and mental health apps more so than before, and so that makes it more widespread and able to access from the comfort of our home. But the fortunate part is I think UVA is very supportive. I mean, we're here talking about
Yeah.
it, so we can't do something until it crosses our mind.
For sure.
So-
sure. Do you think there are any sort of misconceptions about therapy that are out there?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of misconceptions and myths. We'll kind of tag team on this one, but a very common one I hear is that people assume that therapy is only for when they're in crisis and to help them get through the crisis. That is, of course, one thing that therapy can do, but I think it can do a lot more than that. So sometimes people just want to understand themselves better, or, there's just a lot of stressful things going on that they want to talk through, and all of those are good ways to use therapy. Similarly, people think of it as, oh, it's just a place to talk. Clearly, we spend most of our time talking with people, but there's a lot of work that goes on in therapy for people to make the changes that they want to make. And the last thing I'll say before handing it over to Karen is I hear it less now than I used to, but one of the things I heard all the time and still occasionally hear is that people are reluctant to engage in mental health services for fear that it will affect their bar application and process. That absolutely doesn't happen. The bars have gotten really on board with the importance of mental health.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. My gosh. It's better to start working on these things now in school.
Right. And I think the bars, I don't know what they were like in the old days, but these days that's pretty much where they're coming from.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think you hit on some big ones. Some things to add as a person of color therapist. I, often invite cultural sensitivity in our therapy space. I see a lot of international students or family systems or people coming from cultures not trusting healthcare or trying it for the first time because they're out of their family of origin. They've decided to explore something new for themselves. And often what I hear in terms of a myth is not to seek outside assistance, and that maybe therapy's only for serious problems or people who are truly severely mentally ill, versus what I would want to dispel that myth is that mental health is for everyone. If you have a brain, you have mental health, and that early intervention is best. And just like your physical health requires regular practice and effort, so similar good mental health requires consistent attention and proactive strategies.
And the great thing is taking care of your physical health also helps you take care
That's
of
right.
your mental health.
That's true. So I want to talk a little bit now about specifically law students and lawyers. I've always sort of wondered, well, is it the kind of type A perfectionist person who decides they want to go to law school and become a lawyer? But then they're also in a very challenging industry. So kind of the personal characteristics of lawyers that are underlying, but also the characteristics of the profession, I feel like historically have compounded in ways that may not be ideal. And I would just really love to hear what the expert take on that is.
Yeah, as far as personalities, there's definitely some very driven people, very hardworking. But in terms of personality types, we see the gamut. I think law school has space. That's the nice part of the full range of personality types and approaches. But that being said, generally I think wanting to excel, very hardworking, detailed, high standards
High
for
standards.
themselves.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, you said hardworking. I was thinking hard on ourselves.
Yes.
I'm putting myself in that category.
Yes.
Very tough on ourselves mentally. And that, of course, not good for your mental health.
We
to
talk
beat
a
yourself
lot
up.
about self-compassion. Lawyers are humans too, so
Yeah.
and law students are humans. So
Yeah. I love that you are there, like reinforcing these ideas for them, because I do relate to this idea that there are these traits and characteristics that are great for when you need to perform or when you need to take your exam or argue in court, but they can be rough on your mental health.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, the professions, as you said, sort of exacerbates this.
Yes.
Like, not sure I've ever heard a senior lawyer say, "You're working too hard. Please stop."
No.
And so the more you know how to manage and where your limits are, you can, help bring that in when they're throwing work at you. And we'll talk more about this later, but one of the wonderful things is it actually turns out people tend to both feel better but also perform better if they're taking care of themselves and not
true.
driving themselves into the ground.
And you mentioned, Karen, earlier, celebrities. It's like if more people talked about it, if more law firm partners were like, hey, I just got back from I'm leaving early today to go to therapy. You'd be like, oh,
it's okay.
it's
Yeah.
okay. Right. So I think that's really important to just become sort of more mainstream. So related question to this, but slightly different. Do you, again, speaking totally in generalities here, do you feel that there are specific issues or mental health concerns that are particular to the legal field or law students versus the general population?
Yeah, I think they've been doing some research over about the last 10 years that does suggest that the rates of depression, anxiety, and alcohol and substance use are higher than in the general population. Again, I think, we can wonder about which way the arrows go in terms of personalities and in terms of workload. But I think that is the world that law students are going into. It's not specific to the personality necessarily, but it is to the kind of work and the difficulty of work that's going on. And so it's really, really hard in a lot of law jobs to have life balance, to have self-care, but super important. And, I think the intensity work also with the limited time makes it hard to figure out how to decompress, which may be one reason why people, go out to bars or what have you.
So true. I tell our incoming students at orientation every year, look, you are about to do something really hard in law school, but just let's get it straight. Law school is not the difficult part. Law school is when you are surrounded by your friends and you have all of these people whose entire jobs is to be looking out for you and helping you. And, our psychotherapists and our career counseling, academic services, all these things, peer advisors. It is a challenging time, but it's certainly not what law practice is going to be like. And so I tell them, get into the good habits now, manage your stress appropriately now while you are here and while I think they have much more bandwidth to do that. And it's just going to be easier to keep those habits going when they're in the stressful situations of practicing law. So what do you two feel are those good habits and patterns, and how can people start to address those things or continue to address those things while they're in law school?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to be teeing it up like that. Just as people spend a lot of time studying for the LSAT in preparation for going to law school, I think even before they get to law school, they can be implementing some of these and making them routine. So, nothing sort of that people can't expect, but getting into good daily routines with your work and having a break for your, downtime, your personal life, certainly taking care of physical health. And that's something I think this generation is better at than mine was. Lots of people exercise regularly, eat healthily. Sleep is the one that maybe is hard for all overachievers, but that's, worth paying attention to as well. And then I think if you have those habits in place, it's easier to make shifts when you get to a higher level. So when you get to law school, you probably won't be doing all those routines the way you did before law school, but at least you know what's important to you to do and how to try and work to fit it in. And I think the same thing is true when you go the next step to practicing law. Even harder, but it's easier to build on the foundation you already have than create a new one.
Well, and I tell people, like, you do have free time when you're in law school. You have a lot more free time in law school than you do when you're practicing. And if you can look back to the pre-law school time and think, God, it felt so good when I was, going for my daily walk, or when I was getting my 8 hours of sleep, or when I was making my food, or whatever it is, if you can sort of remember what that feels like, I think it's easier, like you said, to have a baseline and then know, like, oh, those good habits will get me into a better mental space. Anything else you want to add, Karen?
Yeah, I think anything that is feeling restorative. 1L I've heard students tell me it kind of feels like you're on the go a lot. You're taking classes that you haven't particularly chosen. So I think if it's not like your favorite class, being able to balance it with things that restore you. And so maybe that's sleep, maybe that's physical exercise, but also I think the things that give you pleasure and that feed your soul.
Yeah.
And getting back to something you were saying earlier, I think there's a lot of myths about what one should do in 1L, mostly revolving around being super stressed out and doing nothing but work. We haven't seen that be effective at all. I mean, 1L is challenging for all the new experiences and for, drinking from the fire hose. So it's not easy to balance your time, but it is well worth the effort.
So I want to go back to the pandemic. Okay, I think we all felt the impacts of it. I hardly think anyone could be immune. There was fear and isolation, and I think everybody's mental health was affected to some extent. But I think a lot has been said about the younger generation. And I remember thinking, God, my heart just breaks for the high schoolers, especially, and college students who really were in those formative moments. And, you think about friendships and sports and clubs and like still almost like more frivolous things like prom and, just things that they were not getting to do. And the college students like being away for the first time and then suddenly they're back at home. And so I would really just love to hear y'all's thoughts on, for the generation who has come up through that. So for those high school, college years, which by the way, now we are seeing them as law students. Okay. So what impact have you seen specifically on that population?
Yeah, I think just what you said, all of those things that, it is especially harder for younger people. I found that it was harder too for younger people with non-dominant identities. So when we think about what occurred with the pandemic, we're still seeing the ripple effects of that. And it makes sense that there was heightened anxiety and confusion and, maybe some social anxiety or delays. And then also what was hard during that time is younger adults who were trying to enter in the job market were hearing about hiring freezes and economic instability. Just hits them a lot harder.
Hits them harder. And like you kind of take away the carefree nature of what like that time should be, because suddenly a global pandemic is possible. Like if you had told me that when I was 16 or 17, I'd be like, it's just so out of your control.
And I also think the flip side that we also saw, which was, getting physical treatments, getting into mental health treatment became much harder post-pandemic with people retiring and more need. So the tools that we advocate for people using were just a lot harder to get available. The good news for UVA is the Counseling Center here has really expanded their resources over the last 4 to 5 years. And, for example, having folks embedded like we are at the various schools. The good news for us is the Princeton Review actually ranked our Student Health and Wellness Center as the top student services center for the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So we are fortunate compared to the community that while it's not always completely fast to get in, it's typically much faster.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, and I think, there is so much that is lost when you're not in an in-person setting. Like imagine if you based your relationship with someone on like how they text
And in some ways, we appreciate more things we took for granted.
Totally.
I mean, there was so much anxiety about socializing, but everyone I know is, holding on to their friends
God.
tighter and closer than they used to because it was so hard when we didn't have that.
Well, I was going to say, we really doubled down on the community once we were able to, at UVA Law specifically. I think there was a very intentional, hey, remember what we are all about.
Yeah, and I think Zoom, when it's not exclusive, is a blessing. We find now we give students the option of whether to meet with us in person or by Zoom. Most people want to see us in person, but some don't. And, also it's we can quickly pivot, if someone says, hey, I'm not feeling well today, could I Zoom in instead of coming in for the meeting? Done, not a problem.
And you don't lose that valuable work due to something like that. That's great. So pivoting off of that slightly, you hear a lot about, quote unquote, this generation, which I think has been said since the beginning of time. Every generation feels that the one before or after them is, makes no sense and is out of touch and so on and so forth. But is there something unique to the generation that's kind of in their early 20s right now that you think is important to note when it comes to mental health?
I think they are more apt to ask for help.
Ask for help and state that they, I think as we've touched on before, they're more open.
Mm-hmm.
They've had more challenges, I feel like, and maybe that is why they're more open, because they feel like a collective sense of, hey, look at all these things that have been impacting us maybe.
Yeah. I also think as someone who is very far from being Gen Z, it is a real privilege to hear the concerns and interests and values of the Gen Z folks. I mean, students at the law school are much more diverse than they used to be, which I think is good both for the law school and the profession. I think they're more accepting. They're more aware of the challenges facing all of us now and going into the future. And so many of them want to make a difference and want to put actions behind their beliefs. And so I feel really privileged to spend time with them all.
I love that you put it that way. They are a very caring, compassionate generation, it feels. Very aware, very informed, I would say. So speaking of coming to UVA Law and being in the environment we're in, I just want to talk a little bit about how your office works, how these sessions work. So can you just give me an overview? Let's say I'm a 1L and I decide I really could use some counseling. How do I know that that's available? How do I make an appointment? Can you just kind of give us an overview of that process?
Well, we try to make it easy. So we're on this podcast. So
getting the word out.
Yeah, just accessing us at law is kind of removes that barrier where, students can come after class. In terms of scheduling, we prefer that they do it through the patient portal, since we have scheduled appointments. And there is a special joint email that we have. But just kind of to back up a little bit, the most important thing to remove, I guess, any concerns are confidentiality. So we take that seriously. It's our duty, it's our code of ethics to have a safe place to talk about anything and not just about school and academics. So we care about how you're processing these things and also that it's no additional cost. So they're already paying student fees. So this is a benefit. Students often ask about insurance. But yes, to answer your question, the easiest is just to schedule on the patient portal or send an email.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned something that I guess I didn't even think about, but it's important for people to know. Just because you two are on site at the law school, your sessions are not limited to I'm having this issue in class or I'm having this issue studying. It's they can talk about anything they want, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe that sounds odd. I just realized that kind of.
Yeah, law always comes back in, but
of course, yeah.
But there's plenty of other things to talk about too.
And just a couple of other things that people may not always think about. We're also happy, if there's a one-time thing that talking to a mental health provider that they think that might be helpful, we're happy to do that as well. And we're also happy to sort of help people, if they want resources in the community or outside of CAPS, to sort of know some of the paths or ways to get there.
Great, great. And by the way, you had mentioned our accolades on Princeton Review for our Student Health and Wellness Center. Do other law schools have psychotherapy available? I just don't know this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I took a look before this to see, which I did a few years ago, and certainly it's becoming more common, but I'm a little interested that it's not moving even faster. So if I did my counting right, about half of our peer institutions do have counselors who are specific to law school. There's some others that have, programming that are directed to law students, specifically, but may not have a specific person for it. So I think it's a great trend, and I think the ABA supports it, so hopefully it continues.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. You had mentioned this, Kate, other resources. So someone could come to you maybe and say, okay, I want to have a session, but there are other things that they could also do, or other resources at the law school, maybe if that's not right for them. Can you just talk about what those might be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are other clinics, and sometimes there are some stipulations in terms of how they can get in. But in terms of consultation with us, there's also consultation at Main CAP, so that's about 2 miles, part of the Student Health Center, crisis services. So if it's more pressing or urgent, and subjectively, if they feel like they can't wait, you could walk in.
Yeah.
So another, barrier removed. They can also call in or walk in.
Yeah.
And there's on call 24/7, essentially. We do have psychiatry. Maybe they're curious about a medication consultation, or if they've been on medication before. We have psychiatry. It's not standalone, however. So at CAPS, it's a combined care approach, but we do provide referrals in the community if students want to seek psychiatry during their 3 years at the law school. And then we have Timely Care, which is an app, a partner of CAPS. So you download the app. There's 2 paths. So one path is the on-demand counseling. So maybe you just want to problem solve. You're not sure if you really want to commit to therapy.
Right.
You can just talk to a licensed counselor in 3 minutes. It's like having a counselor in your pocket.
Yeah.
And that's 24/7. And it could be big or small concern.
Yeah.
And then scheduled counseling is the 12 regular sessions like teletherapy.
Got it.
And students use that because we tend to see students just if they're residing in Virginia. And so if they're on summer internship, then Timely Care is something that we bring up as an option if they feel like they need it.
I imagine there's some sort of crossover. The Student Affairs Office has, I would say, general check-ins with students, right? Like, how are your classes? How are your exams? Like, how's your living situation? Things like that, where they could say, okay, maybe I'm going to refer you to CAPS if something is really outside of that scope.
And vice versa.
That's what I was gonna ask. Does someone come in for counseling and you're like, you just really need to get a study schedule, or you need to maybe move into a different apartment? I could see it going both ways.
Yeah, and I think it's often both and. One of the things I love about working at the law school is not only are there student services that are directed to helping students, but the people in those positions really want to help students.
Yes.
So we are often saying, as well as seeing us, maybe it would be helpful to talk to student affairs or financial services or, the admissions folks, PAs. There's so many kind of supports for mental health that aren't directly, trained mental health providers. And I always think more is better. So I'd rather have people 2 supports than 1, 5 than 2, et cetera. We do know that the more people feel part of a community, the more they tend to flourish.
Absolutely. Okay, so at the beginning of the show, today it's October 28th, which means next week is the national election. I don't know if you 2 know, but there's an election coming up. How anyone could avoid it, is beyond me. But, by the time this episode comes out, okay, we might not know the result, but we will have a sense of kind of the political climate or how it went. We just talked about how wonderful our community is, and it is. But I think that times like this, it can be actually challenging to be in a community because we actually very much pride ourselves at UVA Law on our ideological diversity, specifically among, as Kate touched on, other types of diversity. It's vital, actually, that people disagree and don't have the same views. And we in admissions work to bring together a diverse community in that sense. And for the most part, that works, right? Like, you create a tight-knit community, you teach people how to disagree. I think it all can work very well. But I do think that that is really tested in times like this. We are all feeling vulnerable. The particular issues that are up for debate are really personal. And then you add on top of that this is like a training ground of training people to argue for a living. And so then you add, it's like a tinderbox. It's like, we're going to teach you how to make the best argument you can and also throw you together with all these people who feel very differently than you do about things that are very personal to you. You can see how it could be just our very tight-knit community of people from all walks of life. I feel it really has to withstand times like this. And again, at the end of the day, UVA lawyers are out in the world as reputable, respectful, great lawyers because I think they came from an environment like that. So a couple of things come to mind when I think about this. Do you two, in your roles, like see an uptick in people who are seeking counseling during times like this, or is it really, or I guess, are the people that you're already talking to feeling more stressed? Just curious how sort of the national climate is impacting you on kind of this individual level.
Yeah, I think when you explain it with that emotionality like you just did, I'm feeling some stress.
Sorry. Oh my gosh, not my intention.
But I think it's just, we're people. We're just dealing with a lot. And with the presidential elections on top of it, also, especially when you're navigating spaces where you're not sure, these are all new people that you're trying to impress, both socially and professionally. So I think in terms of the uptick, I'm not completely sure about that. We have been working with people who had issues that predated the election and problems. So we also give them space to talk about how the world events are affecting them. But interestingly enough, they're more concerned about their personal things.
That makes sense.
Which is nice. That's been my experience.
Yeah, similar. I mean, we sometimes do get an uptick in people who come in, in reaction to a specific world event. But more often, it gets woven into what we're talking with people we've already been seeing.
Right. So what advice can you offer to people? I mean, man, like myself included, who feel that they're worried or having anxiety. I mean, again, this is going to be coming out at a time when we could see a lot of division. So what advice can you offer folks?
I think there are some strategies that are commonly suggested for any sort of engrossing world event. And a lot of it is going back to the technology and the social media. So, managing your news feeds or cutting them off, even though it feels so urgent, it's not like anything is changing moment to moment. So considering just checking your news once or twice a day and actively forcing yourself not to do it when you have a spare moment. Same thing with doom scrolling. Media is really good at having provocative headlines, send us all down the rabbit holes. And so the more, is it helpful to read polls that you don't even know how accurate they are? Is it helpful to read one person's anecdote about something if it's going to pull out emotions? You certainly can, but it helps to keep a balance if you are very intentional about how you manage your social media. It's also great to lean on the things you already know are important, your social connections and supports, and to look for things you can do to create a sense of control. So maybe you do something to help out your community, or your, something at the law school, just to remind you that while the big things we have but so much influence on, there's the personal level that we can really make a difference in.
That's great advice, actually. putting some good into the world. If you feel that you personally are feeling anxious about the national, or, do something much closer to home. And I think that I love that advice.
Yeah, I think everybody has their own stress response, their natural go-to. People pull away, or some people are pulling for more companionship. And I guess as a person of color, or with people, as Kate mentioned, that were directly involved, I tell students to consider your own capacity and your own bandwidth to be helping, like the time, like now, like with all the things else that you have going on.
Yeah.
And that helps you kind of decide for yourself to choose about whether to get involved or not and what you want to do, because there are gradations of ways to still contribute in our social causes. So just paying attention to your self-care, racial and emotional battle fatigue is a real thing. It catches up on us. It takes a physical toll. So just taking time to take breaks, as I mentioned before, just being able to restore and replenish yourself so that you can provide more and be in those spaces and help other people. I think that's so important.
I think that's great advice, because at the end of the day, they're going into the legal profession, okay? Regardless of whether you're in big law or whether you're providing direct legal services or you're in the federal government, you are going to be not always dealing with your own personal stuff. That's never going away. But now you're adding to it sort of the weight of your clients' problems that you are getting paid to solve, right? And so, if you're not taking care of your own self, it's just going to be so tempting to take home all of the issues, especially if you're in like a really tough, legal services, legal aid, if you're in a prosecutor's office, if you're a public defender, but also on the big law side, I remember I had a ton of pro bono clients. Those things weighed very heavily on me. So doing the wonderful things you two both said now, I think is just going to be almost like professional development for them as well. So anything else you want to say about sort of how to navigate challenging world situations when you're feeling vulnerable, with people who are opposed to your own worldviews? Anything else you want to say about that?
I think just to echo what Karen was saying, you're not obligated to have the conversation with everybody who wants to have the conversation with you. So sort of knowing where you're at in terms of, emotional cushion, tiredness, who the person is that's wanting to have the conversation, you can decide, do you just say not today? Do you have something a little on the surface, or do you really get into the depths of the disagreement? And there, I think things like respect, civility, letting each person present their views without interruption. Those are sort of good tools, but I think, kind of picking your moments where it feels either important or you have available resources to have those conversations.
Absolutely. You can't engage with every single person. And I think listening, like just prioritizing listening, I think is always a good idea. So before we wrap up, speaking of listening, for our listeners out there who are currently, working on their law school applications, or they're considering going to law school, they're deciding where to go for law school, what advice can you offer those people?
Summarizing what we've been talking about for the last hour, I would just recommend that tending to your well-being now and going forward is one of the best preparations for law school, your career, and your life.
People ask me a lot, what can I be reading? What can I be working on? What can I teach myself before law school? It's like, I say, you don't need to know anything substantive beyond, if you were admitted, we feel that you are ready. Take care of yourself. Sleep. Connect with your family and friends, feel good physically, get in the right mental headspace, and that will get you a really, really, really long way. So I'm glad that the expert is signing off on that. What about you, Karen?
Yeah, I just feel like, when we talked, it's just protecting our peace, just knowing that you're enough, that even though you're going through all of this application and anxiety and thinking about the future, being able to settle into what's happening now and soaking that up. Like today is actually not a bad day,
Yeah.
but our heads goes into the future about all the
Right.
what ifs and worst case scenarios, which of course a lot of lawyers do, and that helps your profession.
Sure.
But just, taking a step back and thinking about your mental health, and that it's just one day at a time,
Yeah.
and that today is not that bad. So,
Right. Knowing you're enough, knowing you belong here.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't touch on this at all, but I imagine you see, because even I see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people with imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah. I think Dean Jefferson said, and I concur, like we've rarely met someone who doesn't feel it. The problem is, I think the more you get away from majority culture, the more it's easy to feel it more intensely, more frequently.
So true. This is giving me a lot to think about. I mean, our students are so lucky to have you both. Anything else you want to make sure people know before we sign off?
That everyone that gets admitted to UVA Law School does, in fact, deserve to be here and is not an imposter.
Love that. I obviously, wholeheartedly endorse that statement. Well, Karen, Kate, thank you both so much for coming on the show today. This was wonderful and I think is really going to help a lot of people.
yeah, it's been a pleasure. I'm just so glad that we could talk about anxiety and mental health. So thanks for having us. Thanks for the listening audience.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. It's been great to have a chance to talk about wellness and mental health. And best wishes to all your listeners out there as they consider law school and applying.
Thank you so much. This has been Admissible with me, Dean Natalie Blazer, at the University of Virginia School of Law. My guests today were our two on-site CAPS psychotherapists, Dr. Kate Gibson and Karen Painter. For more information about UVA Law, please visit law.virginia.edu. The next episode of Admissible will be out soon. In the meantime, you can follow the show on Instagram at @AdmissiblePodcast. And as a reminder, Admissible is now on YouTube. You can check out all new episodes there, along with some vintage content we're sharing to help guide you through this application season. Thanks so much for listening, and please remember to rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts.